Okay, my name is Matt Verjanik, and this video is about how to make this walnut box, and in particular, how to do the inlays. Now this box, well, before I get started, I'm not a professional video maker. I'm a professional woodworker, so bear with me on some of the rough points I have making the video. Anyway, this box is constructed from mostly solid walnut. There's some plywood involved, there's some veneer involved, and as you see as we go through it, hopefully I can guide you on how I did this. Whether it's right or wrong, this is the way I did it. And the box is made from 1/2-inch stock walnut, solid walnut. Has a 1/8-inch plywood bottom and a top that's constructed like this, partly from plywood, a 3/8-inch thick plywood, and it has walnut edges, which is nothing more than a walnut frame that I glued on there and flattened to be exactly the same thickness as the plywood. The reason for the walnut edges is to make the edges stronger, as this will be veneered on both sides, and also so I can do the relief on the edge of the banding. To use this with I used a 1/4-inch roundover bit on here to soften the edges. But I'd like to talk about how I did the top. The top is veneered on the bottom, which you can't see right now because the box is made in one solid unit. It doesn't open at this time. I have to cut it all the way around on either a bandsaw or a table saw, and the reason for that is so that all the grains match and the box top fits the bottom perfectly. Otherwise, if you make it in two separate pieces, it's hard to get the pieces to match correctly and to fit correctly. This is a pretty foolproof way of doing it. The reason the top is plywood and veneered rather than a solid piece would tend to cup and warp a bit over time and cause the box not to fit correctly. The plywood is much more stable. One of the problems you do have with doing plywood is the joint that you make here. After you veneer the top, if you don't use an underlayment veneer, this joint will cause what they call telegraphing. And what that means is that this line where the two dissimilar woods meet will expand and contract at different rates, and it will eventually show through the veneer. Now in my case, I didn't do an underlayment cross veneer on here as is normally prescribed, because this line where the inlay is right over the line, so you won't notice the telegraphing as it comes through. But normally what you would do is put a plain piece of walnut veneer at an angle on here first before you put the finished veneer on top. That'll prevent the telegraphing from coming through. You can see I also inlaid some holly stringing going around the edges. Has box joints that were cut using a Freud box joint jig on a table saw. The bandings are, this banding is a walnut cross banding. This is a fancy walnut and maple banding. This walnut cross banding has these two white colored edges incorporated in the banding, so those two white lines and the walnut cross banding are one unit. The central portion was done using a walnut burl veneer. I made an error on here. That's the reason I put this business card of mine on here with this arrow that points to that corner. And I'm going to try to zoom in on it a little bit. It's very difficult to see, but in the corner of the box there's a spot right there that's a little darker than the rest. And what happened was when I routed the groove to inlay this fancy walnut and maple cross banding, I ran the router a little bit too far, and I repaired it as I was doing it. And you'll see, I just wanted you to see that because you'll notice in the video how I'll talk about how I repaired that. These bandings are put in 8 segments. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. They're mitered in the corners, and they're cut at 90 degrees right on the center line here, 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 and here. And the reason for that is to get balance with the banding, so you notice that the corners, all the corners appear the same and the center appears the same. If you lay it in one strip, it's very difficult to get the corners to match. This way it's much easier. Okay, like I said, my primary purpose here was to show you how to do the inlays and not how to make the box, but I will talk a bit about how I made the box as we go along. All the bandings and the inlays, the stringing, but not the veneer, was available on my website at www.inlaybanding.com, and I actually make and sell the bandings and the stringing. Okay, I'm Matt Verjanik from InlayBanding.com, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a box. And I've already cut this piece up and put it together. But my objective is to show you how to do inlay and not how to build a box, but since I'm going to have to make the box and it's part of it, we're going to do it. So I've cut all these pieces, and they're already cut for a box joint. I made this with a box joint jig on a table saw. Okay, so that's the these are the sides of the box, and once we build the box, put it all together, we'll saw the box in half. We'll build the box totally, and then we'll cut it either on a table saw or on a bandsaw, and we'll have the top and the bottom that'll fit exactly right using that. Okay, this is the bottom, and you'll notice that it's a piece of 1/8 inch plywood, and I've already applied the felt so that it's easier to apply the felt before you put the box together and make sure your dado is big enough to fit the felt. And that way you don't have to worry about trying to fit that felt in there later. Okay, the other thing I've done is, let me get the top, is I've made the top out of plywood and framed it, just butt joint glued a walnut edge, as you'll see later why that's important. And it's important to make the top out of plywood rather than solid wood, because the plywood's more stable. It's not going to warp on you. We're going to veneer this on both sides, and we're going to do some inlays on it.